It's important to know that you can't move on from anything without facing yourself first. And when I say facing yourself, I feel like a lot of people have their own idea of it. And a lot of times it's just, oh, well, I'm the reason we ended, or something I did, or maybe it's my fault for this. And that might feel like it. That definitely might seem like that is exactly what you need to feel, when really what it is accountability. And it's understanding, the role you played in whatever happened or why it ended, and especially accountability in moving on. And I think that's understanding that you are capable of moving on more than anything. A lot of people have this idea that they can't move on, or that they'll never move on, when really you can't until you forgive yourself. That is the most important part of it. We have to understand that you can't move on from anyone without forgiving yourself and understanding the role you played and whatever had happened in the relationship. You have to understand that who you are now, that you're capable of moving on, that whatever happened isn't something that's now going to define you. This doesn't have to be something that you string along for the rest of your life, but you are capable to understand that you can move on, that you are worth more than how that person treated you. We have to realize that people don't determine our value. We do that ourselves. Who we allow to hurt us, and how we allow people to treat us definitely says more about our own self-respect and our feelings for other people than anything. And I think when we present ourselves with this low value, and we kind of have this idea that no one will see this and that everyone thinks we're lovable, that's all we'll attract. We have to realize that our perception definitely shapes our reality. And when we want to date people and understand deeper connections, we have to realize that this is something that can happen. This is something that can continue to dwindle and hurt us, when we have this idea that we aren't worth it. And really, it starts with forgiving yourself. It starts with adding that love and that attention and care to yourself to get over that thing. And I think a lot of times when we are trying to support other people, we have to realize that that same support is something we need ourselves. We're not a superhero. We can't just do everything by ourselves all the time. And I think when we go into solitude, it's definitely an idea that we have, and I think being stuck in that solitude kind of makes you question if having a connection is even worth it anymore. And I think as soon as you start questioning that, as soon as you start having this idea that maybe it's not worth it, I think that's definitely a sign of being in solitude for so long. Having this idea, even though you haven't talked to people, or even though you aren't really trying to connect with anyone, this idea that being in solitude is definitely for you, forever, that you're never going to have a connection, it's definitely false. And it's definitely tainted with so much pessimism. And we have to realize that it can only hurt us in the future. This idea that we'll never have a connection isn't something that can actually prosper for anyone. We have to have more faith, not only in other people but in ourselves, to understand that we are capable of experiencing love. And I think a lot of times that love is something that people are hurting themselves with. You kind of realize that how much you value that love definitely says so much about your character. And I think when we value it more than ourselves, or we're doing things in order to get to that love while hurting ourselves, this is something that damages us. A lot of times we have to realize that that suffering, I've talked about it and made a lot of videos on suffering and pain, but I definitely do feel like a lot of these things can kind of be self-imposed. We are kind of creating issues for ourselves, or creating problems, just because we're either used to that comfort of sadness, or because we don't know what we're doing. And I think when we take so much time away from people and we pour it into ourselves, we have to realize that solitude isn't just this place of not talking to anyone. It's working on yourself. It's actively using that time. And I think we have to realize that time can heal people, but it's not going to change anything unless we decide to change within that time. We have to realize that time won't heal you, it's just distracting you. And I think we have to use this time to actively heal ourselves and pour into ourselves, and that means a lot more than a solo date or giving yourself more time of the day. It means actively looking at what happened to you, what hurt you, and realizing that you can move on from it. Understanding the things and the role that you played in that will only help you prosper more into the future. And I think a lot of people have this idea that with time it will heal, when a lot of times we kind of just leave that wound open, and now when we go into future relationships, that same wound will get reopened because we never closed it, because we never faced that issue. And the same happens with relationships. When you guys argue or bicker and a lot of things start to go south, and you just move on like it never happened, or wait till the next day to start talking again, now that thing is still existing, you guys just aren't facing it. Now it's going to be something that can come back and hurt the both of you. Especially when you are willing to be vulnerable and willing to open up to this person, you guys are kind of setting this self, damage to yourself. Now it's going to be something that happens in the future, and it's not something you can actively control. And I think if we want to feel better about these relationships, we have to be a lot more confident within ourselves, embracing whatever hurt us, embracing the things that might have damaged us. And I think that embrace that we are adding to things definitely starts with being able to forgive yourself. And the love that you give to other people, and I've made so many like videos and topics on it because I feel like it's so apparent when really it's not, is that when you pour so much love into other people, it definitely restores a part of you. And a lot of people can do this as a form of healing, but I feel like as important as it is to give love to other people and be a good person, and not ask for anything back, we have to make sure we are giving that love to ourselves. And I even made a video on you can't heal people while you're broken. A lot of people told me that, no, this isn't the right way. When really, what I'm saying is that you definitely can heal people, but you're still going to be broken. You're still going to be lacking in that department for yourself. And I think a lot of times when you heal other people, or at least attempt to, and it doesn't work out, now you'll be even more damaged. That's the problem with trying to heal people while you're broken. It's like trying to save someone from drowning while you're sinking yourself. How are you going to do that for anyone? Why would you put anyone in that position? Now it's going to be so much easier for this person to hurt you while you are broken and trying to help them. And I think you definitely have to have, this equally yoked feeling in a relationship and in a connection about the level of, effort you're putting in and the time and all these emotions. And I think when you are only doing that for yourself and you're single-handedly going out of your way to heal other people, it will hurt you. Trying to help other people can damage them. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, or a lot of people even understand, the thinking behind it and the emotion behind it. But we do have to understand that that's not always something that we should be doing. We shouldn't have to go out of our way and volunteer to do that because we might be hurting that person, and we have to understand that, we're not here to help and heal other people. And when we do that, we can actively be hurting that person. I think we have to realize that when we are taking their own responsibilities and assuming them ourselves, we are now taking that power away from that person. Now they aren't going to be able to get over these things because they've never done it by themselves. They don't know how to heal and how to actively, become someone new out of it if someone keeps coming to save the day time and time again. And I think when we've done this so much, we have to realize that this can be damaging in the long run for someone. People have to learn how to heal by themselves. And you can definitely aid and help people and add to their life. But I think as long as you are doing that, from afar, and you are being able to adjust and assist people in their own healing, that is healthy. And I think when we go out of our way to do everything for this person and make this person feel, so much more better, we have to realize that we are now being an emotional band-aid. And when you are that band-aid, you have to realize that when that person heals, they throw that band-aid away. They don't need that band-aid anymore. They will definitely forget who helped them get out of that pit. And now they are able to move forward without, being attached to anyone, without being attached to anything, because now they have this idea that, well, now that I'm healed, I can do whatever I want. And a lot of people kind of get stuck in this and they don't even realize that this is something that happens so often. And you talk about, relationships and connections, and there's so many people that say, well, I did everything for the person, they still left me. We have to understand that that's not entirely your fault. It's not your fault that you're a good person, you want to be there for your partner. No, it's not that at all. It's understanding that it doesn't mean they owe you back. And I think when we kind of accept that and we understand that this person doesn't owe us back, or this person, doesn't have to add anything now back to us because we've done so much and we've gone out of our way to help them, we have to realize that, that might end up hurting us more than anything, is that we're trying to help this person and we're trying to help people that don't want it. We're trying to save people that don't want to be saved. And I think we definitely have to understand that that's a very commonality thing nowadays. A lot of people don't want that. We're trying to save people that don't want to be saved. You're pouring so much energy and effort into someone who's going to take it for granted, who's going to do whatever they want, who's going to, move on, take all the benefits from whatever you just said or whatever you just did and take it for granted. And they're not going to come back and say thank you. They're not going to come back and reciprocate that thing. Even though we aren't giving love for it to be reciprocated, we have to realize that it can still be damaging in the end. It can still hurt us in the end. And I think we have to understand that sometimes we do set ourselves up for that. We set ourselves up for disappointment when we attach, expectations to people and potential. And I think that potential is definitely something that we have to give to ourselves. We have to give ourselves potential before anyone else. I think that's something that no one is doing, honestly. And it's really hard to think about, but when we are speaking about it, the potential that you have, the ideas that you have when it comes to giving someone love, we have to understand that when we value it so much for one person, why can't we value that for ourselves? You know, you have this idea of this person can be, and this person is so lovable and that they'd be a great partner. But when you look at yourself, you're like, I don't know. And you kind of see yourself in reality and don't ever face it. When really, if you gave yourself half that effort, half that imagination, half that optimism, you'd see that you are deserving as well, that you can be someone new. And I think we have to understand that seeing our own potential, seeing ourselves in a healthy way is something that is entirely up to us. And that correlates with forgiving ourselves. That correlates with our value and how people will treat us, because it's now our perception. And your perception is the only one that truly matters. We don't have to rely on anyone to feel a type of way. And I think the more open we are and the more understanding we are of that thing, we are now able to move forward with it. You can experience so much more love in your life as soon as you start accepting that you are capable of doing anything after you forgive yourself. That forgiveness is what's needed. You know, that forgiveness is something that is lacking. And I think so many people are trying to move on without doing this. And you have to understand, forgiving yourself isn't just some affirmation. No. Forgiving yourself is accepting everything that's happened and knowing that you will be okay, that you made mistakes, that whatever you did, maybe you should have handled this differently, or maybe, you know, things are kind of your fault because you looked at it this way, and it's not being biased at all. And I think seeing people, seeing emotions, especially when you're able to do it so open-minded and not being biased, is what makes it so much healthier. You have to be able to see that for yourself. Start forgiving yourself, and that becomes reality. And I think that's what a lot of people are missing, and they don't understand that, you know. And the more energy we're putting in, the more energy we can get out. And that comes with working on ourselves first. Before anyone else, before looking to save anyone or becoming the white knight again, be that for yourself. Forgive yourself and understand that you are capable of getting over anything if you tell yourself you can.